the chief executive is coming, but I don't see him. And we have Paul Coe, Joseph Holmes, who I still don't see, Claire Lawrence, welcome, Claire. Thank you. Eric Owens, April Purbity. Thank you, got that right. Felicity Harrison, is that Felicity? Yeah, that's this, okay. And Catherine Mackin. Catherine is a Manchester United supporter. Oh, sorry about that, Catherine. And Gordon Oliver to my left is the clerk for the meeting, and the meeting has been live streamed via YouTube. And Lizzie Reeves further to my left is the Zoom host this evening. Before we start proceedings, a bit of a piece of regular admin. For the benefit of the members of the public who may be watching, tonight's meeting has been held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone participating in the meeting to make sure they've switched on their microphones when invited to speak directly into them, and to switch them off and finish speaking. And it's not down here, but could you also make sure your phones are off? If we hear the fire alarm this evening, as we did the last time we were in this room, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exit. Assembly point is the Dolphin car park. And if the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from the officers. Members have any questions about the way we're running this meeting procedures? Okay. So, Chairman, I've got to ask, any apologies, Mr.
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Jeff Brooks and also from Councillor Graham Pask and Councillor Dennis Pennyworth is substituting, from Councillor Lynn Doherty, and Alison Webster from Thames Valley Local Enterprise Partnership has also given her apologies.
Right. Okay, can I go to the minutes of the previous meeting, please? I've had a look at them and I didn't see anything. Has anybody got any comments at all? I'm not going to go page 1, 2, 3, or 4. Anybody got any comments? They seem to be reasonable to me. Okay. Okay. Well, I will I'll sign this copy. Add it to the board. Oh, yeah. I do need a formal proposal. Who's going to propose it? Councillor Abs. Who's seconded? Councillor Cole. Okay. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? Yeah, unanimous. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Sorry, John, I'll abstain. I was present at the meeting.
Sure, understood. Understood. Unanimous for those who are at the meeting. Actions from the previous meeting. Gordon, do you want to take us through them, please?
Yep, I'm still awaiting responses on the first 3. I have chased a couple of times, so I know Gilman Stanley is currently looking into those for me, and I'd hoped to get something today, but I wasn't able to. Next one is 79, which is the Economic Development Strategy Operational Review and information about the top 10 employers. We've got Catherine Makins in the room here today, who's given us an update on the various activities that they are carrying out in relation to the district's major employers. I won't read it all out. Then the last 3 actions are for Joseph Holmes and Melanie Ellis and are all complete and relate to the Revenue Financial Performance Quarterly Report.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Before anybody else makes any comments, I'd like to make 2 comments, please. I'm very happy that we've actually got the agency spend table on the papers, the financial papers today. It took us a while asking for it, and I was beginning to wonder if we were ever going to get it, but they have, so that's good. On the economic development strategy, Catherine, I read it, and there's progress there, but you know, well before your time, we've been asking for this. And I understand the difficulties you're probably having in saying, well, who are the 10? How do I define them? And you've mentioned this in this. I would like, and I'm not going to be here at the next meeting, but could I possibly ask for another action, please? It would be nice, perhaps, if you could bring a list to the next meeting or something to the list to the next meeting on what you've selected as your top 10, 12, 13, whatever. Because you know, I'll be candid with you. I'm getting fed up with people telling me they're doing it, and they're working on it, and we're still trying to figure out how to do it. So it would be nice, frankly, to, as a going away present for me, please, at the next meeting, to have an actual list of 10 to 12 companies that we're going to be consulting every so often during the year. Anybody else got any comments on the actions? No, that's fine. Thank you. Move on to the next item, which is declarations of interest. Anybody got anything they want to declare on the agenda tonight? No. Okay.
Chairman, seeing chat and on the webinar chat here saying the volume appears very low. I don't know if that's just your microphone or all microphones, but that's a comment in the chat.
Maybe I haven't followed my own instructions and spoken into the microphone.
Maybe.
Who's saying that now? Is this better? Okay. Tom, is that okay? Howard, can you hear me? No, he's still, right. No idea. Everybody in the room can hear me, right?
It says still quiet, but slightly better. So I guess the closer you can get, the better.
Apologies, but that's the best we can do, I think. I think just be cognizant of that, members, and really do speak into the mics. Okay. Item 5, petitions. I'm not aware of any. Gordon, do we have any?
None received, Chairman.
Okay. So then we'll roll straight ahead into item 6, which is the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership Review, the LEP. So I have Catherine and do we have, is Ross online? I understood he was coming. Catherine, at least can you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Introducing this review of the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. I won't go through it in detail, Chairman. Obviously, I will take questions in as much as I can. Alison Webster was invited, but as we know, has unfortunately another commitment. However, she did provide some useful information today, which I'm most happy to circulate to members. It gives a little bit more information as regards spend and individual projects. So if I just briefly introduce, the council this council currently contributes £10,000 a year to the LEP. And there was an additional one-off contribution this current financial year agreed by all of the local authorities as a transition. But to be clear, we've gone back next year to the 10,000 a year. I won't go through the background as to how the LEPs were set up and the fact and how they were originally intended to fund and be run, but just going through the supporting information. We have various different links in West Berkshire with the LEP in terms of how it's managed. We have Ross McKinnon representing the council on the LEP forum, and we also have council leader Lynn Doherty representing local authority leaders on the board. We have a number of different officer groups and a chief executive, Nigel Lynn, and Eric Owens and myself are all active there. I've included a appendix which sets out in a bit more detail what's going on. But essentially, we're now nearing the end of the way that the LEP currently works. And there's been a change of policy direction in the current government, which means that a lot of the funding streams that used to come through the LEP are now coming straight to local authorities. And so therefore, this has been useful in terms of looking back and how the LEP has the activities that they've carried out in our district. But going forward, it will look quite different. And there's not a lot I can say about that really, because that's still under discussion. So Chair, I would happy to take any questions.
Okay. I've got Councillor Linden's hand up. Tony?
Thank you, Chairman. On the crystal ball gazing, Catherine, where do you think it's likely to go in Berkshire? Because obviously it's just the Berkshire 6 unitaries. Because obviously in the reports it does say that it's still doing some useful work. Could you expand it slightly on the direction you think it's going to go?
I'm afraid that's above my pay grade, councillor Linden. I believe the discussions are taking place at quite a high level. I can't really speculate how it might end up.
So the service director, Eric, said he might know something, Chairman.
Eric?
Yep, thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, we are, the directors for Berkshire discussing with the LEP potential future options for what it may do, but that's still in a very early stage at the moment, and that's linked into what the government may want to go out the LEPs in the future. So we're not entirely sure at the moment. We are in active discussions with the LEP though. So we are hopeful that we can continue to use a degree of their skills and expertise for how we take things forward in the future.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions? Tony?
Yeah, I've got about 10 questions, Chair. The first comment is somewhat personal in that only last week did I learn that I have been for most of the last 4 years the substitute or reserve member of the Berkshire Transport Board. And I wonder how that came about. It would have been nice to have had agendas and minutes and even have the chance to attend, albeit as a non-voting member. But, you know, I'm a great fan of, and I say this having been one of those that supported the move to unitaries, I'm a great fan of having this sort of structure available at the county level. We do need it, and there's a lot in the report clearly shows that it does things that we couldn't do without it. So if I may just move on to a few of my questions, and there's a sort of theme developing out of them. In 5.2, para 5.2, it says that it was LEPs generally are intended to leverage private sector investment. Be nice to know to what extent that's been successful. You know, how much private sector investment has gone into the various projects, you know, as a total. You know, are we talking about 10% of the total funding or 90% or somewhere in between? If I just give 3 questions and then
Go ahead.
take it from there.
Yeah.
Next one was on para 6.5. Yeah, what does my little note say? Yeah, it's all very well saying this is part of a devolution initiative and the council's coming directly to, the funding is coming directly to councils, but it sounds as though it's another beauty contest system where, yes, you get the funding, but you have to bid and you might or might not get it. And the person deciding is up in Whitehall and not in Berkshire. So I'd like to know what officers think of the 2 ways in which so-called devolution has happened. And it's disappointing, I feel. My instinct is that it's not the sort of devolution that any of us would want, what's being talked about. And on 6.10 was the next comment I had. Yes, I've already raised that. Why was I a sub for nearly 4 years and nobody told me?
Okay,
I'll leave it at that.
Can't answer that one. Can anybody answer that one? No, I see all the heads shaking. Anything on the funding, Catherine? Can you? I know it's not. If it's to your question was is anywhere near 10 or 90%. It's if it's 10%, we're doing well. I think from my experience.
I'm afraid, Chair, I don't have any information on that. Obviously, I can come back. I think generally, whilst that was the original intention, most of the money has come through government pots. So I would be surprised if it was very high. I'm not aware of any private sector investment coming in, for example, in West Berkshire.
I wasn't when I was on the LEP, and I was on the LEP for the first 4 years. It was minuscule. It was mainly, in fact, it was mainly European money. And that's what I had a question, actually. I've noticed in the report for still referring to some of the European funding. I take it that's already gone now.
Chair, if I could, shall I answer that one
Yeah,
and then
I'm
come back
asking.
to Councillor Vickers? Yeah, so the European funding money has now gone, but there are still some legacy bits and pieces going on that the LEP is still involved in administering, but essentially no new projects are being funded under those schemes.
Okay. I got a couple of follow-ons on that, but I'll go back to you, Tony. Councillor Vickers, the other.
So yes, the one about the beauty contest, I wrote down what do officers think of devolution. As far as I'm concerned, obviously I will try and do the best for West Berkshire under whatever system is put forward. We have unsuccessfully, unfortunately, put forward a couple of bids under the Levelling Up Fund, but we continue to try. And we have been successfully been awarded money under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund.
Can I just follow up on that? Because when I was on the LEP was a great lobbying body. And I'm sure the LEP must, and it's associated to six districts, I'm sure, must have an opinion on what's good and what's bad about what's being proposed. Are we collating that? And that's a job I would have thought the chief executive, I'd love the chief executive to be able to be here to answer that. That's something I would have thought that the LEP should be collating and then jointly lobbying our, I don't know how many MPs Berkshire have, but at least half a dozen, the various MPs and back into government. We must have an opinion of what's good and what's bad. Eric.
Sorry, Chair, is that what's good and what's bad in terms of the way the funding has been divvied up now? Is that the question?
Well, it's the funding, obviously the end product, but there's all this, there's words here about so-called devolution and, trying to, at one time it was saying, okay, well, the LEP's the one thing, it's sort of all Berkshire and we'll give them the money and let them divvy it out. So it is a money related thing, but it's also a decision-making thing because what we're now saying is at least infrastructure and transport's not even going to come down to this level. It's, each individual, there's no devolution in this. It's each individual authority bidding. So, surely we have an opinion on whether that's good or bad.
Exactly, Chairman. And what are the resource implications? I mean, do we have a figure on how much of our resources was expended when we were bidding for this money through the LEP compared with how much is now expended when we have to bid direct, each of the six authorities? If we could pull that sum, it would be evidence upon which to base an opinion, I think.
I agree. Eric, you want to come back?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt, the LEP coordinating and facilitating engagement to government and six authorities doing the same activity is more resource intensive. There's also no doubt that six authorities bidding into pots when we could have been working and bidding into the LEP for a pot again is a different way of doing it, is more intensive for the authorities. The actual cost of that would be difficult for us to provide because we know we can probably assume and provide figures on our costs, but that for other authorities we'd have to request.
I mean, I think your opinion, the officer's opinion that there's no doubt is enough. I mean, if somebody did, say if government said, well, look, prove it, then it might be worth spending money, but I don't want to incur more cost asking for that figure.
Exactly. I'm more interested in somebody actually grabbing this by the scruff of the neck and basically saying, we're going to put together a commentary on what's being, because some of this has just been proposed and not finalized. So we still got an opportunity, I would have thought, to influence the final outcome. I mean, I got questions about one of the roles that we thought we'd be pretty good at a Thames Valley level was internationally promoting inward investment. I don't know anything about the future, how that's going to pan out.
Well, that leads on to my next question, if I may, Chairman, which is in para 617, we talk about the Berkshire prospectus, creating 3 investment opportunities in our district. Question is, how much interest has there been? Has it actually leveraged in, proper investment in the way that our own, initiative has done on the environmental?
And the last sentence of that section says, however, the value of the service to West Berkshire.
That's concerning. Yeah.
Could Catherine, Eric, could you comment on that, please?
I can comment on that, Chair, by saying that I'm not aware of any direct approaches to us as a result of the Berkshire prospectus. But as you also say, we've also been promoting this ourselves anyway. Newbury Town Centre Master Plan and Vision is on a sort of journey towards delivery, and we've got the first meeting of the steering group next week. Newbury Active Travel is something that we are always looking for money to, and we've successfully, I believe, bid for money for that. So it is something we are looking to work on. And in fact, under the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we have a small bit of money to work up an investment strategy and some support and resource to help with whole estate plans, which was an idea that came up through a rural business forum recently.
Okay. I've got councillor Abt. Adrian, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure what the feedback was there. My point is more generic, really. Or if I look at the rest of the way that the council's built up and the advisory groups, they're all proportional. This one isn't. The membership of LEP. It isn't, as far as I can tell. And it may not be possible to do that if the membership is too small. If there's only two, it's difficult. It's impossible to have proportionality. However, what it does mean is that if ideas can come from anywhere, then we're missing out on kind of something that could be beneficial to the council as a whole. So I really would have appreciated seeing some kind of before or after a connection to what's going in and out of the LEB, just to allow more ideas to actually circulate around the whole thing. And that seems to be missing. We're reviewing it now, and that's fine, but it's kind of a bit late in the day by the time it reaches here. So.
Okay. Catherine?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to come back on that, I think it's certain that in the letter that came out from the Minister on devolution, the idea is that the LEP works much more closely with local authorities than it has in the past. And that's part of what, the drive behind the change. In the past, it was very much set up as a business organisation. So the majority of seats around the table were given to businesses. And there's always been this difficulty with local authorities having that voice at the table. But my understanding is the intention is that will change, and we should going forward have a much bigger say.
May I come back on that, Chairman? That sounds like there should be a LEP advisory group then, and whoever's going to be that representative then has the advice of the group to go with.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that in my time on the LEP in the early days, I would have agreed with that, because you're absolutely right, there was quite an involvement from the private sector, but there was also great involvement and engagement by the public sector, by all six of the thing. And we had I think you still have it, the forum, which is basically the local authorities putting into it. Just doesn't seem to be working. That's the sense I'm getting here. Tony, do you have anything else? I'd like to involve the chief executive in a minute.
Just one more, and then I'll rest. I mean, just to preface it with a remark, I think it's coming clear that many of us have been out of the picture as regards what the LEP does and how it does it. And I think I get the sense that we'd all like to be a bit more involved. I'm not saying we need votes in it, but just to know what's going on and how to access minutes and agendas. But the specific question, last one I have really is, you say at the top of page 31, para 619, reference to Berkshire opportunities, which I think is great to see that there is a link into the schools, but you say it's difficult to assess the impact. What would make it easier was my question.
To assess the impact, yeah.
Yeah.
Catherine?
Thank you. Because it's open to everybody all across all across Berkshire, but indeed nationally, to be honest, it's difficult to correlate between how many people in West Berkshire have managed to get a job or training. But I'm very happy to go back to the LEP and ask whether there's anything that they can give us in terms of data from clicks on the website, etc., as to whether or not they came from IP addresses within our district.
James. Tony, I've still got a hand up for him. Is that legacy or is it another question? Okay, and I've got B as well. No, James.
This is getting to be a bit of a pattern here. I've been on this council for 8 years, and yes, I'm now departing, and that'll be a relief in some quarters. But reading that document, I realized I knew almost nothing about the LEP. It was a rather interesting document to read, thinking, pity I didn't know about that before. There's some quite good stuff in it. I couldn't help thinking at the end of it, but while none of us really might want the return of Berkshire County Council, there are areas where we do need a wider approach. So there is a purpose. Catherine, one question. You mentioned the Newbury Town Centre. Is the money for the Hungerford Town Centre coming from the same source?
So Chairman, currently for Hungerford and Thatcham, we're in the process of developing the town centre strategy. So once they are all endorsed and we've got the steering groups up and running, we'll certainly be looking to use that and the great engagement we've had with stakeholders, residents, businesses to bid for money for projects coming out of those strategies. To be clear, there's just one project coming from the Newbury one, which is the Newbury Wharf, which we worked up using some leftover money to get us to that point. But yeah, this is the intention is to bid for as much money as we can for all three town centres.
Thank you.
Okay, Tony.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to, before I'm going to go into what I was going to discuss, just remark to Councillor James Cole. I think it's really a slight problem that members haven't had more interest. I know we have an executive model. I've been on the council for 35 years. I had a 5-year absence courtesy of the electorate from 95 to 2000. And I think that if we have, and something we need to move forward in the next council, is that we should have more member involvement through member development sessions on things like this, which could be very useful, and also allowing members to input who are not on the executive. And I think, you know, it is rather siloed, and I think that is one of the problems to being. I mean, I'm on the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority, which is a committee-based system, and we do learn far more than we do on the council. So that's one point. But the point I was going to raise, and that is on page 30, employment and skills, was career advisors through the Careers and Enterprise Company. I know career advice has been a bit different since I was last at school. I left in 1977, but there are a lot of schools in the network, but we have career hubs, and it appears to me, well, I'm very pleased that Little Heathcote's in my, well, our ward with Joe Stewart and myself, and Brookfields is in the next ward. And we've got Downs in the west, but we've got nothing really, and we've got Willink in Burfield, but you know, we're missing out really.
We have a question coming.
Yes, I'm going to ask Catherine why we haven't extended in Newbury and Thatcham right in the middle. So I just wondered that maybe we might benefit from additional hubs.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't my area of expertise. I'm very happy to go back to Mark in education, who I work closely with. But what I would say is I know for a fact that St Bart's, where my own schools are, have got some very active careers work going on in their schools. So I imagine it's about local choice and about whether or not the schools choose to be part of this network, or whether or not they choose to perhaps follow other types of careers advice and enter into arrangements with other providers. But say I'm more than happy to go back and come back to you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Local, Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, let me say that I know quite a bit about the LEP, principally because I run a startup accelerator. So my company has at various points interacted with the LEP at various levels, and the
You
chair.
should have declared that as an interest.
Is it an interest? No.
Yeah. So you should
All
have
right.
declared that. I guess that's what you're now doing.
Well, I didn't think it was an interest because like anybody else, if you utilize services in the neighborhood or in the county, does it mean you have to declare? If it is, then okay. I have not utilized their services, but it's publicly available.
That's fine.
Now,
I think you're now covered. Go
okay.
ahead.
All right. Thank you. So, and my comments really have been echoed around the chamber in terms of awareness of what the LEP should or shouldn't be doing. And given that we're kind of reviewing this, and I think that's one of the things that really has jumped at me about the LEP is that it seems to be this organization that's supposed to bring these great things and pushing economic development, but people don't necessarily seem to know. For example.
Do you have a
Councillor Vickers-
question?
Yes,
Because
I do.
we're
I
gonna
have
be
a
here
question.
tonight if people come in with
Well,
with whole streams of
It's not-
comments
it's-
before they ask a question.
right.
Ask a question, please.
So my question is, what are the KPIs that have been set in terms of when we're making investments or putting money into this? What are the KPIs by which we measure the performance of the LEP?
Okay.
Thank you.
Catherine, Eric?
Chairman, I'm not aware that for our £10,000 there are KPIs, but I'm happy to, I don't know if any of my colleagues know. I think it's a very long-standing arrangement. The benefits, I would, having looked, done this work, clearly are more than £10,000, but
I don't think you need a value to have a KPI.
mm,
But anyway, I'm not aware of any KPIs in this, so maybe there should have been, maybe there should be. Something to be looked at, make a note of that if we can. Okay, I've got Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a fairly simple question. With the changing direction from the government that's been indicated recently, and which may evolve from the LEP or into something else, are we just moving the chairs on the deck in terms of how we act as a local authority and whatever the LEP morphs into and has been in the past? Are we not just shuffling money around? Is there not, has anybody worked out whether it's the most efficient vehicle?
I think that's the key point that's come out of this discussion.
It doesn't seem like there has been.
No.
And, in these fiscally challenging times, everybody's bidding for pots of money here and there and everywhere. And if the LEP gets some money, how do they decide where it goes within the 6 districts? And it's an ever decreasing pot. So it just seems like it's money being moved around, and it's lots of headlines. We get this, we get that.
Well, it's changing because it used to be the money came into the LEP and the authorities and people through the likes of Catherine interacting with them and through the Berkshire, what's it called, Public Service Network, reacting. You would projects would be proposed, for example, like the road at London Road Industrial Estate, for example.
Can we be assured that this is going to be a more efficient use of that money?
No, yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. It's the one I'd like to end on that, actually, and I'll try to address Nigel. The overall feeling we've got, and I've probably got in this room, apart from Catherine, maybe Eric, more experience of the LEP. I was there at the birth. I know what it was meant to do. And I got to say, after about 4 years, it was doing it. And I get quite frustrated that we don't seem to grasp where's this going. And we seem to be letting government drive it. I don't see any coordinated, maybe there is, we just don't see it, but I'm not hearing or seeing any coordinated pushback. Give you an example. The reason why we set up one of these things for inward investment, it was, with all due respect, no matter how good we are in West Berkshire, you can't compete with the Welsh Development Agency. The likes of Thames Valley LEP had a chance to do that. And in fact, combining with the M3 LEP, which is what happened at one time, there's quite a powerful international lobbying organization. So, what's happened to that? We're talking about one economic growth and development and attracted at a local level, but you've got to be able to get out there to the big world, and we can't compete with, as I said, the likes of the Irish development agencies, the Welsh development agencies. That's what it was doing. The other thing I'm concerned about is there are other organizations that are trying to do the same thing. Chambers of Commerce. There's another one, a Small Business Association. I can't remember what it's like. What's that? Yeah, exactly right. So where's that? And we actually spent couple of years early on getting a relationship with those 2 organizations. So we all were working, if representing Berkshire and talking to ministers and to the MPs, all 3 were in sync. Where's that? So, Nigel, what's going on? Where are we heading?
Those organizations, CBI and Federation of Small Businesses, actually sit on one of the boards or the advisory.
I know
groups of
that,
the
yeah.
LEP, Right.
Yeah, I know that. Nigel, can you guide us here, please? Tell us, give me a comfort that we're actually doing something to try and influence the future direction.
I'll do my best, Chairman.
Okay,
And apologies for being late, and I missed the start of
That's
the
okay.
discussion, so some of the things I say may have already been picked up. This was obviously set up by the government, and the government have reported, it was about a year ago, which was talking about how they were going to review the LEPs, and there was some discussion around that, but that hasn't progressed any further at the moment. And certainly the LEPs have had additional funding this year, but I think it was around 50% of what they had in the previous years. So there's obviously a demise of what their current position is. But I think the thing to remember is at the moment, this is the only game in town. This is how the government have set up how they will deal with economic development through growth, etc., and through funding arrangements. And I think that the LEPs are in flux at the moment, waiting for what happens next.
let me just interrupt. That's what concerns me.
Yeah.
I'd like the 6 Berkshire unitaries and the LEP to get together, maybe with even a
well,
few other LEPs,
I'll come
and
to that,
actually
Chairman.
lobby to say, you're in flux, here's what you should do.
Yes, well, I'll come to that, Chairman.
Okay.
So there are a couple of areas who have set up what they've called growth boards or prosperity boards,
Right.
which are very similar to the setup of the LEP arrangements. And I think that is probably the direction of travel that things are going in. The advantage of those boards, whatever they're called, are that first of all, there is more democratic decision making, because you'll be aware that the local authority decision making part of LEPs is fairly minimal, and also that there are more large businesses involved in the LEPs. If you look at the LEP, our current LEP, the scale of the businesses involved are generally pretty small and not the major employers across the Thames Valley area, and they're the 2 biggest criticism of the current LEP. However, having worked with other LEPs, I actually think the LEP we have is pretty good, and it's done a lot in the past, but it's in this flux at the moment of knowing what the government wants to do and where it's going to go in the future. So there have been discussion across chief executives and place directors around working with the LEP and with other agencies to try and decide and help take forward what the future of the LEPs may look like. But until the government gives further indication, I think we are still in that limbo at the moment. But I would hope that during this year, during 23, there'll be a greater sense of direction of where we're going. In terms of the amount of money that we put into it, the risk, I would say, of saying we don't want to be part of this at the moment is that we would probably all end up, all 6 authorities, setting up our own larger economic development team and bringing in relevant experts to provide the data that is provided at the moment. They do a tremendous amount of data gathering and research and updates, which is presented to the Berkshire Public Service Network every month, and Catherine and Eric get that data, and that's tremendous. So if you're not careful, you'll be employing far more people than we currently fund to get that data. And they also help us with any funding arrangements and funding bids as well going forward. So I don't know if you've said, Catherine, about the Prosperity Fund, but they've helped on that sort of thing as well. So I think we are where we are. Let's wait and see what happens during this year, and hopefully there'll be clearer direction from the government. But I suspect that growth boards, prosperity boards will be the way forward, and that will be an alternative to the LEP. It won't be as well as, it will be an alternative to, and hopefully on a similar sort of funding level. And I think that's probably where we're going, but there'll be better democratic coverage and larger employers involved. That will be the aim, I think, of that future arrangement. And if you look at Buckinghamshire, they've done this quite recently. They've set up a growth board.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I still don't like the tone of waiting to see what the government do. Mr. Lennon was right, and there's a state of flux, as you call it. Those who have a firm idea and decide to go for it usually get what they want. It would be interesting to me to make some firm, the two group of Berkshire people get together and make some firm proposals and go for it. And then the government, anything that's sensible, I'm sure the government will accept. Well, they can only say no anyway. Tony, last word, please.
Well, I think my view is that this might be a good forum, as we've got all three of our local parties represented in. And as people have said, this is normally an executive function whereby only the ruling party gets a vote, if anybody. If we actually formally voted to agree with broadly what I think we've heard, that we would support any option to replace the LEPs with something that is more democratic, and definitely we want to keep something that allows decision-making more at a local level. However, whether it's elected representatives, but local decision-making, which was how the LEP was set up rather than what is proposed. And as you say, Chairman, it may not be too late for some lobbying to start here on a cross-party basis.
I think we got a sense of that. But we've been asked to note this report, and that's what we've done. And I think we've gone around this one to death. Let's move on to the next item, please. The next item is, thank you, Catherine, for your participation. It's just a pity that Ross wasn't here to support you. I'd like to invite Councillor James Cole, please, to present the final report on the Customer Journey Task Group. James.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to make some comments. I thought this was a very good working exercise. Firstly, my thanks to Gordon. Without him, we would have been up a proverbial creek without a paddle. The collaborative approach that I referred to at the November meeting did continue. I think it proved that while we may fight like cats in front of the camera, with no camera, we can get along perfectly well. Was it justified doing this exercise? Customer journey. Nigel Lynn at Hungerford Town Council last night said he thought that customer care was an issue. He then heard a comment at the same meeting that there were difficulties with the housing team. Nigel put this down to the same customer care issue. Our little group have produced a report, and the main reported comment back from corporate board was surprised at the number of issues on our list, not apparently at the detail. Yes, I think it was justified. It did take a very long time. There were some additional factors like the death of Majesty, but we found ourselves beginning to understand just how wide the subject was within the terms of reference. If I were to be continuing on the council, and no, I'm not, I would never agree to do this again quite like this, but I would certainly have agreed to continue with it, breaking it up into smaller chunks. And I recommend that to you. The bit about the customer charter that you will have read, that was brought in without consulting us, and it seemed to us that it would have been reasonable to give us a look in advance. Perhaps that's something that the next committee's members might wish to think about. We were very surprised to find out late on via Hilary Cole that there was a customer first program board. I do not understand even now why we were not told earlier about that one. The planning service caused the largest amount of discussion in my memory. There have been a large number of changes in the way it works. We were told that the changes were for the benefit of the customer journey. Personally, I think that remains to be seen. Just for example, I had an email from Paula Saunderson this morning. Paula is proactive as a resident, as some of you know. Well, Paula asked why she no longer received the weekly planning emails. She received a response from planning saying, we now publish the weekly lists on our website at such and such address. They're updated by 9 a.m. every Monday or Tuesday of a bank holiday. So it would appear that we withdraw a proactive service using a simple email distribution list without providing the ability for residents to sign up to receive them. As she says, the difference in approach is the level of proactivity on behalf of the council. This has now been withdrawn from us. So have you stopped, I'm still quoting her, sending them to the developers and councillors as well as ordinary residents. And when you withdraw a service, you should give us notice and advise the workaround. Actually, all of that seemed rather reasonable to me. She even also suggested a simple solution in that set of emails. Terribly sorry, but this does not look like an improvement to the customer journey to me. I would say that this committee should consider looking at the planning customer journey on its own in the future. In the light of the statements made, many of the IT recommendations, and there are a few, are shown as in progress or programmed. But the one that seriously surprises me is number 21. All new IT systems should be rigorously tested to ensure they are not released with bugs, with sign-off required by service leads. This one is shown correctly as of high priority. I'm still in the IT business one way or another. To me, it seems utterly basic and totally obvious. There is no progress marked in that report. I just cannot understand why, apparently, there is no progress. Nevertheless, a lot of the issues we did raise have been or are being dealt with. Some will take longer. We recommend all of them to you. My gut feel is, if anything, we may have held back more than they might have done in some areas, but this is a cross-party report. I do have some other notes, but I thought I might spare you them, unless you really want them. I think this committee should ask for updates in the summer on these recommendations if they are accepted. I think that a piece should then be looked at again, and if I were it, I were here, I would choose planning. And I would certainly, in doing so, allow for time to talk to some of the users of the service, the public. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, got a couple of hands up. Tony Linden first.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just put some brief points really, rather than answering a question. I noticed we had a problem in the 1983 when I first joined the council, that letters weren't being answered, and now we have emails and things like that, and there's challenges there. And we've had recently an email from the chief executive on that point. I've also noticed that it's sometimes difficult on our website to access certain information, like if in a rush, trying to find the council's phone number. I know we're trying to discourage people using phones, but there are quite a lot of people. Mother doesn't live here, but an 88-year-old mother of mine doesn't use mobile phones, doesn't use, people still use phones. And there are people, not just the elderly, but there are people who are disadvantaged. And we have people in our district who are, and people who may not have the capability to use IT and would prefer to use a telephone. So I think we do need to do that, even though, we don't want people ringing up. But we do have a contact centre. They do an excellent job. And I just think we need to make things as easy as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Bennyworth.
May I just respond on that one?
Go ahead.
This is not a setup, but the first note I
certainly
have
hope not.
not read out just happens to relate to the council's phone number. I was unable to get into a meeting last week, and I couldn't get through to the meeting chairman as his phone's off or on silent. And it turned out there was what we'd like to call a technology problem. But in the meantime, I tried to phone the council to get through to the meeting room. No phone number, I didn't have it. I needed the ordinary one. We're not out of hours at this point. There is a contact us on the website, but that's a form without a phone number. I tried to search on phone number on the website. Top of the list is a letter to residents on Dunstan Park and South East Thatcham Flood Alleviation Scheme. So I tried council phone number. Top of the list is pay your council tax. But down that page, I did find council offices. Clicking through that, I eventually found the phone number. At that point, an email arrived explaining there was a hitch. I also tried West Berks council phone number. That got me even more results, but kicking off with pay your council tax. Where I should have gone was Google. If you ask Google for West Berks council phone number, it appears in large letters.
Okay, yeah, we can.
I have sympathies
Yeah,
with Councillor Lynn.
I hope this form is all of it, but a little bit more about summarizing as opposed to going down, having individual war stories.
I couldn't resist it.
Because we'll be here all night with war stories, and that's just me speaking about them. Dennis.
Thank you, Chairman. You won't be getting a biography from me. Just wanted to commend the work done by all members of this task group. I think it's an excellent piece of work, and it in some ways opens a whole can of worms, really. And as Councillor Cole was alluding to, it was probably best divided up into several parts. My question is, where do we go with this? I know last night, as James alluded to, our chief executive, we're in the service industry. We provide service, and we need to know from our clients, the residents of West Berkshire, how we're doing and how we monitor that. How we
I
gauge.
think I can answer your last point. Where do we go to this? If we all accept this tonight without any amendments, it goes to executive. Okay, and there's there's a lot of recommendations here, but they have been prioritized as well. Out of 42 recommendations, I know 14 are classified as I. So if it was just down to me, if it was just down to me, I hope the rest of you all agree eventually that what we should do is pass this in total to them and say, these are all real. They're all the individual stories. They're all real. They need to be actioned. They can't all be done tomorrow. Some of them have already been actioned actually, or in the process of them. That's good. And we say, and here are the 14 higher priorities that, we ought to get into first. That's what we're asking this tonight. So that's the answer to your question. Where does it go?
And if I may, Chairman, this is never a done deal. The work is always in progress. And where does these splinter committees, do they then get set up, or what happens going forward? We need to keep monitoring.
We can comment, but it's obviously up to the executive and the administration to set up whatever committee they need to implement these things, or task groups or what have you. That's operational. I'll let that go to the operational side of the business, but we can review later on how effective that operation is.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Abbs and Councillor Biggins.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. For me, a customer improvement program never ends, and therefore its scrutiny should never stop. That's what the works board that was meant to be doing that we didn't know about for so long. I would like to add to what, first of all, that Councillor James Cole did a very good job of chairing the committee. That should be on record. I was part of that myself, and very much enjoyed kind of being able to go through the detail. I think actually he's underplaying it a little bit in that we have a number of high priorities. That's because we couldn't make them all high priority. We wanted to make more. So this is just the start. And I thought I would love to see us, yes, get on with the high ones, but don't forget those medium ones as well, because it was a balancing act that they didn't become high, because otherwise we'd have just too many highs. So.
Okay, thank you. Nigel, you put your hand up. Did you want to respond immediately or wait till the end? Okay. Tony.
Yeah, I can't speak too highly of the work that's been done. I knew, as soon as I knew Councillor James Cole was in charge of it, that it'd be a thoroughly good job. And although I'm taking him on and or trying to win the seat off him, I think we will miss him. And the two things I would like to draw out is that, yes, high priority is, you have to limit the numbers you put high priority, otherwise it degrades the meaning of high. But I also think we need the quick wins, and I'm glad to see that a lot of under the comments you've got quick win, because I think in order to get some confidence in the community out there that we, and hopefully the exec will take this up, we are doing something, we need those quick wins, the easy ones. I mean, I think that's always something you should do whenever you're working out a program and you're dealing with the public. Get their confidence by showing you're acting now and doing something. My background, when I was in the MOD, I actually qualified as a project manager and in a very IT dominated environment, but I'm not an IT person. My approach has always been, is the system designed right? And I couldn't agree more. It's quite mind boggling that we actually allow things to go on the website without beta testing with end users. I can't understand why that hasn't always been done. It's basic lesson number one in designing the system.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Tony. Nigel?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, first of all, let's be clear, we have an awful lot of really good officers doing fantastic work within the council. And whilst we'll always have a need for improvement and the customer journey will never be perfect, as Councillor Abbs has just said, we have made steps in the right direction within the last year as well, and within recent months, which I'll highlight shortly. But obviously, we always need to continue to go forward and continue to get better and better. And as I said, when I was at Hungerford Town Council last night, we do have pockets of issues that we need to address. A couple of areas were specifically highlighted last night, and we are trying to address them. If I start off with the planning charter that's recently gone through PAG, the planning charter is about officers understanding the role they have with their customers and how we need to improve that process. And that's recently been agreed in principle. We've also got the customer charter that Councillor Cole mentioned as well, which has been approved by executive within the last 6 or 7 weeks. And that again is part of our promise to the public in terms of how we're going to respond to their issues as well. Within both of those, there's ongoing training to try and improve the situation and make sure that officers understand the importance of customer care within the whole process. And I can assure you that that will improve with time as it goes on. We've also already had some training already. With regard to website, improvements are being made on that all the time, and we're constantly upgrading it, and we recently improved that as well. But I think ultimately in terms of some of the efficiency within the systems and the issue around telephone numbers and so on, we need to transform some of the services as well. And I've been working with a portfolio holder on transformation about how we can do that. And you'll shortly see a report coming to full council about how we can provide the resources to help improve and transform some of our services to enable us to be more efficient in the current climate where we don't have a dearth of spare people or money to try and throw at this either. So within the current climate, I think we have made moves in the right direction. We can always be better. And I think from this report, we will certainly create an action plan that we need to try and develop and get better and better at the service. But overall, West Berkshire is a very good council that provides good service, but we need to improve.
Okay, thank you. Let me just summarize, if I may, because there were a couple of points that I picked up that haven't been commented on. One of them being we were biting off a bit more than we could chew. The terms of reference were a bit big and expansive. That's correct. But if you remember how we got there, there was an immediate call for an out-of-hours emergency contact system because there had been a couple of issues. It was hot, and we were just about to start the overall customer journey when that came and hit us. So we incorporated that into this task group. And of course, what we did do, we had an interim report which really focused on the out of hours. So that kind of said, well, we already had broken it up into 4, so we have already answered number 1, and the rest of this report, of course, is to do with office hours, customer contacts, and then comparing it with other authorities, because I think one of the things that the task group has done was it actually made some attempts at benchmarking. And I don't think you can, you know, I'm very pleased to find out this charter's been devised, because those are the mission statements. I mean, you can't get anywhere until all your employees buy into the mission statement, the charter. And that's all you know, that's an essential first step. Very good. What I see this report, which I find is very comprehensive, and given that I had not more than one officer complain to me about the depth of analysis that was being done on this. And in fact, implications were you're interfering with our job. Well, I don't think, as I told those officers, you don't understand the role of overview and scrutiny. You know, that's what we're here for. And, you know, you can't make an omelet without breaking the eggs. I think James and his group have produced, in my opinion, a very good comprehensive report. There's a whole list of things. I can't find any of those. I personally, most of those resonated with me in my 16 years experience. A lot of them resonated with me and frustrated me 16 years ago. The question is, you know, why are they still there? Frustrating is all. But this is the first time I think we've actually sat down and pulled them all together in one paper. So I see these 42 as the recipe book. And we'll pass those on with our comments on what we think perhaps should be the higher priorities. And it's up to the executive and the administration after May to go and do their best to as Nigel said, to implement them. But I think OSMC, perhaps March next year, I think ought to revisit this topic and come back and say, we need a report. How are we doing on these 42? What's the implementation plan? I think it's essential. I think compared to a lot of, from what I hear, the experiences with a lot of other services, other authorities, we're pretty good. That's what the peer reviews keep telling us. We're up there. But there's a lot of, as this shows, there's a lot of room for improvement. So well done, James. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, can we move on to the, have you anything else to say?
I need to have a vote on this.
Well, we've been asked to note these and to agree to refer them to the executive. Anybody defer against that? In total, they go, okay, I think that's unanimous that we will do that. Thank you, Gordon. Oh yeah, there was just one other comment that was made about the numbers of the task group. That I think we had four people in it, and it was felt that maybe in future we should have 5 or possibly 6 to be able to have a thing quorum, and you had difficulty getting people together. I think that's always the case, James. I think it's always the case, and you know, if you try to pull a task group of 6 people together, you know, what we try to do here is have at least 2 task and finish groups going in parallel. We won't be able to do that if we add people. Go ahead.
I think I know later in the agenda that we have another group being set up. It's got 5 on it, is the idea.
Yeah.
So somebody read what we said.
Well, it actually hasn't had 5 on it yet. It hasn't been agreed yet.
Agreed.
And it won't be agreed tonight, I don't think.
May I add one more thing?
Go
That is
ahead.
simply my thanks to Adrian, to Bea, and to Caroline, who's not here this evening, for all the effort they put in as well.
Yeah, here, I'll echo that. Okay, can we move on to item 8, please? The library's review. Who's doing that? Oh, right, Felicity, you're online. Go ahead.
Hello. I hope you can hear me. The sound is dipping in and out a bit for me. But okay, the purpose of the report is to present the findings of the 2021-22 Libraries Review. This is a follow-up review that sets out to ensure that the library service remains fit for purpose and still meets community needs after the transformation work which took place in 2016-2017. Significant reductions were made to the library service in 2016-17, including a 44% reduction in staff, a budget reduction of 690,000, the closure of one library service point, and the reduction of 2 mobile libraries to 1 mobile library. The changes that we made, we put a new operational model in place where our staff are supported by volunteers. We've invested in our buildings. We have pursued co-location, and we have the public partnership protection at Thiel Library now. We also worked with the Hungerford Hub there's a community asset transfer took place so that the Hungerford Hub now runs that building, and we run the library service out of the building. We made a lot of capital investment in digital improvements, putting in place new public computers in all the libraries, self-service kiosks in all the libraries, and we also invested in a libraries app to improve customer service. Outreach work. We developed very positive relationships with other council services, in particular early years and working with primary schools. Because of the cuts to the service, we've had to make our outreach work very targeted, and we really decided to focus in on the work with schools and early years, which has been really successful for us. Also, a commitment to more partnership working with local communities and town and parish councils, and linked to that, a new funding model was put in place where we asked our town and parish councils to make a voluntary contribution of £1 per head of population towards the library service in order to meet the revenue gap in our budget. So to carry out the library's review, some community engagement exercises took place with staff, volunteers, town and parish councils, and the general public. We also commissioned an updated community needs assessment, and a peer review was undertaken by the LGA. Overall, the message is loud and clear that libraries are a very, very valued service, and some positive findings came out of this. But I think that there is room for improvement. And the findings of these exercises have helped us to put together a set of recommendations to frame the work of the library service over the next 3 years and maximise the value of the library service for West Berkshire residents. So I'll just quickly go through the recommendations. Firstly, it's highlighted the need to develop a vision for libraries which aligns national and local strategic priorities, followed by a longer term action plan to deliver the following outcomes. Innovative use of space across the district, seeking co-location with community partners is a priority. Also access to services, putting in place locally accessible library service which meet the needs of local communities and reduce rural isolation. Inclusion, working closely with communities hard to reach groups to continually improve access and awareness of the library service. Improving links with secondary schools. I mentioned earlier, we have an extremely positive and successful relationship with our primary schools, but I think there's more work to be done with secondary schools. Digital inclusion, of course, is very important, providing access to equipment, the internet, and enabling communities to improve digital skills and reducing digital poverty. And then finally, addressing the revenue budget gap. This has been the new funding model that we put in place, and I think it needs to be reviewed, and we need to liaise much more closely with town and parish councils to determine a way forward on this. and the next stage will be to consult with a range of stakeholders on the way forward. But I think it's a good opportunity to take questions now on the report.
Okay, well, before we, thank you very much, Felicity. You were coming through very loud and clear. Thank you. If you were concerned about that at the beginning. Before we do,
Thank you.
We've got Councillor Wollaston has his hand up, and he's the portfolio member. Howard, do you want to comment now, or do you want to comment now and comment again later, or whatever?
I think probably both, Chair, if you don't mind. Firstly, just to say that we have an outstanding person in Fliss in running our library service. She's been fantastic. And I also want to say a thanks to all the volunteers that we have who have managed and maintained our library service. West Berkshire Council is absolutely committed to keeping our library service going. Clearly, there are funding issues, and we are in challenging financial times. But there's every intention of keeping the library and expanding the library service in West Berkshire. Chris has mentioned the peer review, which was very supportive. We clearly have a gap in the north of the district, which we need to remedy. And we have a commitment to replacing the Thatcham Library, which is too small and in the wrong location. There's a budget figure put in for the next 2 to 3 years, I think it is, of about £1.2 million to do that. All I can really add to that is we need to do more and better. I mean, one of my big concerns is the mobile library service. Frankly, the vehicle is it's past its sell-by date. I'd like to see it replaced by an electric vehicle or vehicles if we could afford it. I'll leave it for there now, Jen, if I may.
Okay, thank you. You can take your hand down. I will come back to you at the end.
I will do.
Okay, Councillor Linden first, then Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Felicity a question on page 105 on the library usage data trends. Because I noticed that the physical number of visits have gone down, but the items borrowed has been relatively stable and the number of website hits have been actually going up. Obviously, the volunteer hours have gone up as well. No, the library events gone lower, but maybe you can comment on that, please.
Shall I come back on that point now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I've also checking out the more recent trends because I thought you might ask something like that, and the trends are continuing in the last 3 quarters of this financial year. The library loans are up 19% on pre-pandemic levels, and the visitor numbers are still to recover to pre-pandemic levels. But what's really heartening is that the new library members, people joining the library service, is also up by 19%. I think there is a factor here about online usage. We have an excellent e-library, and certainly during the pandemic, the usage of people borrowing e-books, e-audiobooks, e-newspapers, etc., dramatically increased, and that trend continues to increase. And I think that's part of the reason why the loans are so high, but the visitor numbers are still recovering. I think it's also still related to the pandemic, and I think across the board in library services, it's the same picture, that we're slowly recouping our visitor numbers.
Chairman, can I just add to that on the next point down, and that's the mobile library, which is very useful in my ward, with Sainsbury's in Calcutta having a visit. I noticed that the diesel vehicle is 15 years old. Are we looking for a vehicle that may be going electric or hybrid? Felicity, how things progressing?
I think I heard Councillor Wollaston say exactly that. That was his aspiration.
Okay. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay.
I'll withdraw that.
Okay. Councillor Rams.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Felicity, for the report. I know you said you looked at the recent figures with the cost of living crisis. Have you seen people coming and spending longer durations in? I know there was quite a bit of social media and publicity relating to the libraries being open to support people who needed somewhere to go. Has that been a factor? And secondly, the contributions from the parishes and towns, and I believe that's part of the funding challenges. What are the preliminary plans, pathways to remedying that shortfall? Thank you.
Okay, shall I take the first point? Yes, we certainly have been badging our libraries as warm hubs, and also we have been doing, we have a message of the month so that we have a one main theme, and after Christmas that was our theme, was to say we're here for you, we're warm and welcoming, and we're a free service, and you know, I think that's been greatly appreciated by people throughout the district. And we're also trying to link in with community cafes in the district where we can. You'll all be aware of EduCafe, which is hosted at Newbury Library every Wednesday. And we've recently made an arrangement for our mobile library to visit the community cafe at Speen every 3 weeks. So I think those are all important ways forward. Moving on to the town and parishes question, it's a difficult one. So the budget for shortfall was 150,000, well, still is 150,000. For the first few years, we got about 90,000 contributed from the town and parish councils, but that has been diminishing over the years. But I have to say that some parishes have actually voted to give more than the £1 per head of population because they're so satisfied with the service that we're providing. I think that we need to do more work liaising with the town and parish councils just to confirm what they actually want from the library service. I also think we can make some improvements in the way we do that. At the moment, I'm sure you'll have seen in the report that the level of service provided is the same whether parishes contribute or not, and I think it's a question for the future as to whether that's sustainable. And it is a member decision, obviously, and we don't want to reduce our library services, as Councillor Wollaston was saying. We want to invest in them and increase them. But I think there's a piece of work to be done with the town and parish councils to investigate that further to come up with a solution.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Just sticking on that funding issue for a while. I mean, the choice that was made was before my time, so it was made. What I can say is I'm a parish councillor, so I can look at it from the other side when somebody comes along and says, could you give us some money, please? And funnily enough, parishes and towns don't have a lot of spare cash either. And then when you look at that from a user's perspective, well, what's the difference? Either the West Berkshire Council asked for the money in the precept, or a town council or parish council asked for the money, because sooner or later it has to be funded. The difference is, as far as I'm aware, it is the responsibility of West Berkshire Council legally to provide library service and not town and parishes. So I'm absolutely positive there'll be lots of towns and parishes who are desperate to keep their library services, but actually, there'll also be some that simply can't because they don't, without shifting up their own press, they won't be able to. So I think it's a choice. And you're right, we do need to look at that funding model, but that's a separate thing for tonight, I think. I was, you know,
Can I just comment that because
sure, of course.
as you say, you weren't here when it was done. I was. Basically, you're right. There is West Berkshire Authority does have a legal duty, but it's a legal duty to, and I won't say it's not for a full 5-star service. It's a legal duty for a certain level of service.
Yeah, the central library, I think.
And the money that was being asked in addition from the parishes was, if you want to do a little bit more, we need two things. We need a little bit more money and we need some volunteers. So it was, let's not confuse the legal requirement to fund a service and a degree of service.
I'll
with
accept that,
the
Chairman.
service.
I'm simply pointing out there was a choice.
It's not as clear cut. That's the
Oh,
issue.
well, but that's a bigger debate that we have time for
Okay.
tonight. So. I was looking at the data, and thank you, Councillor Linden, for pointing it out. When you look at the data, you go, well, actually, where is last year, the 2022 to 2023 data? I mean, isn't it? It's like it's this year's. I wouldn't have expected this one's to be around because we're only just in March. But the previous years, is it? Or am I misinterpreting the graph completely?
Felicity, do you like to comment?
Because you said you looked at.
Yeah, the report it was based on the data available at the time. It was the latest data set that we had available when the report was written.
Then my note, Chairman, would be that it's pretty poor to be over a year later that we still don't have that data. That's, I guess, that not Felicity's fault. It's just that she's saying that's the data she's got access to. It just seems a bit far behind to be able to make a sensible view of anything. And finally, I was curious, Felicity, do we receive any revenue? Because you mentioned new uses for libraries, which is something I fully support, because the more we can get going on them, one hopes they become more financially viable. So do we get anything from these community cafes? Do we get a cut of the receipts when they sell a coffee or something?
Felicity?
No, we don't. But I think it's a very positive thing because it's attracting people to use our service who may not have been into a library before, and so I think it is definitely a positive relationship on both sides. It's a win-win.
No, I get the bit about getting more people in there, and that's a positive thing in itself. It's just we were worrying about funding, and there's an obvious thing there.
Maybe it should have been part of the next item on fees and charges. Okay, who's next? Councillor O'Loughlin. And then I've got Tony Vickers.
I was trying to mute myself because I thought I was on Zoom. Sorry. Right. Question really is around around the three things, which is 5.51. I think, which is the priorities. Then we have the review recommendations on 5.59, and then 5.61 then has the opportunities for future investment. And I just wondered if there was a need to align those, excuse me, because what's the difference between a priority recommendation and an improvement? And I wonder whether or not we needed to look at how we can align those and then put some deadlines around it, because it didn't seem to be any timelines around how that was going to be achieved. And then the second thing is the data
point taken. Yeah, I think that would be a useful exercise, because it's just really based on financial years at the moment.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then the second thing is about the data in page 105. Around the granularity of the data. I just wondered how granular the data gathering was so that it can be useful in terms of predicting the quality of service or the demands or, the demographics of the use of the library services, and how we can use that to be able to predict the kind of service offering for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any comments on that, Felicity? Did you hear me, Felicity?
Oh, yes, yes, sorry.
Just wonder, had any comments on the last point?
Could you give me the number in the report again, please?
Page 105. The usage data trends. And the granularity of the data that's been collected and how that can feed into assisting the quality and type of future services that can be offered.
Sorry, I'm not locating that at the moment. Can I come back to you in a second? Okay.
Chairman, may I help Felicity, if that's possible? Because I've got
Oh,
it in
yes,
front of me.
please. Yeah. Mm.
What I think it's demonstrating is that the demand for library services is virtually back to where it was in 2016-17. But I think more and more people, as you see with newspapers, are actually using electronic versions rather than hard copy.
Yes. I think that, well, that there's definitely increased usage of our e-library, but I think the use of our physical buildings is changing really, and there is lots of added value things apart from actually borrowing items from the library. If people will be coming in to study, people will be coming in to use our Wi-Fi, use our computers, to go to craft and chat groups, rhyme times, all those kind of things. So I think the usage trends are changing, and the physical buildings of libraries are becoming much more than a place just to be borrowing the books.
Sorry, Chair, my question was actually around the type of people that were using this service. And I just wondered if we had any data around those. So for example, age, type, gender, if it's a particular type of age of people that's using it. I just wondered.
I'm sure I can't find the page, but on the detailed report following the officer's summary, there's a lot of that age, demographics, usage, so that it is there. You just haven't got to it yet. Can I? Let me see. Councillor Abs, you still got your hand up. That's okay. Councillor Vickers, then I've got Councillor Benjamin, then I've got James Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's around para 529 and para 530. So it's the volunteer and staff surveys. What got me thinking there is that it took me back to my own career. The last 15 years of it, anyway, from 1980 onwards, was a huge transformation in the way a service was delivered. And it led to need to completely retrain the paid staff, and also to change the way in which the users, in this case, frontline service commanders, understood what they were able to get and the way in which they could get it. And it seems to me that we've got the same here with the library service nationally. There are points in these paragraphs which I'd like the answer to from the top professional that we employ. I've said I don't use the physical library much, even though I live in Newbury, and it's quite handy because I do so much online. But I do need some training on how better to work online. And yet maybe the staff that are employed are not equipped, as the survey seems to indicate, or some of them aren't equipped with that skill set that is needed to educate and support the modern day users in the modern methods of use. So, I mean, these changes at local level have been largely forced by financial cuts, squeezes, but again, that's national. So what is the trend in terms of people going into the service, the training needs, and what the library service sees itself as doing? Is it about the business of communication by and between the public and the public services, or what? It's not about books or physical things that you book out, is it really anymore?
I think it partly is, but I think it's more than that. It's definitely evolved over recent years. But in terms of our staff, we're constantly upskilling them. Because you're right, it has been more challenging for some staff to keep up with the digital trends, because it's very, very much a need. If you are working in library services today, you need to have a really good understanding of the online services, and also to help people who might be coming in to use our public computers, for example, and they might not have the necessary skills to do that, and they need help in order to access information. But we do have a digital services officer, and we do also have some specialist IT volunteers who help with that. And we welcome people who come into the library, and for example, they might have been given a tablet for Christmas, and they've got no idea how to use it and get to grips with it, and we can help with those sort of things. But it's a constant process of keeping up to date with that. And look, one example, I mentioned earlier that we released a libraries app, which is really well used, and it's wonderful because it allows people to place reservations on our library stock really easily. And we had to do quite a lot of training on that with our staff, some of whom didn't themselves have smartphones, so it was quite an alien concept, and we spent a lot of time making sure that everybody was up to speed with that.
Thank you. Dennis, have you taken your hand down?
Thank you. My question's been answered. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. James.
Thank you, Chairman. I have several. Mobile library. I get the impression that's now more for older people than young on the whole. Is there scope to change stops in any way away from the traditional stops, perhaps to match with a session for older people in a village hall, a session that may not exist at this point? Would you like to answer that one?
Yes, sorry, I'll deal with that now. Yes, absolutely. I think that the mobile library service is a really interesting thing that needs to be tackled. Yes, there is certainly scope to change stops, and we constantly monitor the stops to try and make best use of our staff time. We did this most recently in Speen because we were stopping at a sheltered housing complex and nobody was using the service, so we've changed it now, and we're now going to the community cafe. But we also do visit preschools, but I think that there's very definitely a piece of work needed to see if we can do things in a better way. I feel that the mobile library service, the usage is diminishing, and I think you're right that it does tend to be older people, and there is a question to be asked there as to whether we could be dealing with that in a different way, and whether those people could be catered for by our at-home service, where we have volunteers who select books for customers and take them to their own homes. But I think that it's really uppermost in my mind about delivering a high quality service to rural areas and preventing rural isolation. And we need to really look at that. Is there a better way we could do this by, as you say, linking in with village halls? Could we do this with an electric delivery van rather than a mobile library? Could we have a pop-up library in village halls? There are lots of questions there, and it's a very important area, because it's really important that we do react quickly and deliver that service where it's needed, but we do review it very often at the moment, and make it the most useful that it can be.
Thank you.
May I
James, yeah.
continue? The Hungerford models work really well. The town took on the building, works to hub for the town. The idea was great. Subject did come up last night, Hungerford Town Council again, where Nigel Lynn was advised of the charging of commercial rates. The model works because the operator is a charity and not Hungerford Town Council. The charging started when the charity started to use a spare room to sell local art and so on. Is there mileage to push this model with the other areas that have libraries? And is there mileage to do something about the funding issues? Hungerford certainly doesn't want to give up its library. It's a great institution, but it just seemed a pity that we're into a giving with one hand and taking away with the other situation there. I wasn't expecting an answer from Nigel this evening. He will not have had the time to look into this, but I put it to you as well for thought, because it does seem to me that there must be mileage in encouraging this model to other parts of our district.
Yes.
I thought that's highlighted in the report, Councillor.
Not the issue of commercial rates.
Okay. Okay.
It's a new one on us.
Nigel, you put your hand up. Do you want to address that?
Yes. That better?
I think someone's got their PC mic on.
Mine's off. There we are. Okay, sorry. I'll let Felicity come back with the issue around this is a model. I personally think it's a very good model and something we should progress. So I'll let Felicity come on back on that. But in terms of the issue that was raised yesterday on rates, that has been resolved today, I'm pleased to say. And we've found a way of dealing with the issue, because obviously we don't want to have a community group that helps us in terms of running a library and then we take it away from another source. It was something that was done properly in terms of legislation, something we had to do. There was a much larger discount, I think, than the Library Trust realised, and the cost we were actually talking about is £300, just to put it in scale. But Felicity and her team have resolved that today, I'm pleased to say. But if I ask Felicity to answer on the other part of that question.
Yes, it's been so successful at Hungerford. I can only echo that. I think we have a really good relationship with the Hungerford hub, and it really does work extremely well, and has made sure that the future of the library is really assured, and it's brought a lot more people into the library for various events. I think that one of the reasons it works well is because it was a win-win situation, and everybody's getting something out of it, and I think we would like to replicate that in other areas of the district. And I'm certainly keen to look at that. We were in discussion with one parish council in the east of the district before the pandemic, but those negotiations are paused at the moment. But it's certainly, I think the key to this is finding a hook with the parish council so that it's a win-win situation, as it was with Hungerford, and that both parties are getting something out of it. And there has to be a really good reason why they would want to take over the building to make this work to the optimum degree.
Okay,
May I continue?
yes, but can we just one more? Well,
Really?
Well, no, there's other people want to speak.
Quick comment. We do wonder whether or not the Hungerford model is helping as far as volunteers are concerned. I noted your possible issue over volunteers in the report. Talking to someone in Hungerford today, he certainly had the feeling that we don't have so much of a problem. It is as if people perhaps think they're helping the town, not the overall organization. Anyway, it seems to work. Library fines. I put an instant comment of how can we possibly have an income target for library fines? And then later on, I saw a recommendation that maybe it should go. If you get rid of the library fines, will you then, of course, find that books will disappear? Yes, of course they will disappear. They will not come back if there are no fines. Would it be feasible to have some sort of points system? You bring your book back late, no fine. But if you overdo it and bring every book back late over 12 months, then maybe you do get a fine. I'm not trying to do the detail. Is the principle feasible? We do have computers after all. It should be feasible to do it within the computer systems.
I think it's best to keep it as simple as possible. And one of our recommendations is to look into the idea of removing library fines completely, just because they're a known barrier to library usage. And to encourage people to use the library service. The trend nationally is that more and more library services are abolishing library fines and charges. I think about 40 authorities in England have now abolished them, one of the most recent being Reading. And the evidence that this has just been happening in recent years, but the evidence so far suggests that it doesn't cause stock circulation problems with people not bringing back books. So that's quite a positive thing to do. I wouldn't like to overcomplicate the method of dealing with this, particularly as we have volunteers would sometimes be responsible for administering this, but the whole concept of removing the fines and charges is one that I think we definitely need to look into.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Abbs.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to come back in. For me, all decisions should be driven by the data. And what I've heard time and time again tonight is we don't really have all the data. So I do put a request in that when the report comes back, that we have data that's only a couple of months old. And also that we have data that actually includes the seasonal trends. And both Councillor Loco and Councillor Masters have both brought things up where that information would have been of particular importance to us to make any kind of thought process, because I'm concerned about what I'm looking at only from the perspective of a lot of the consultations that were referred to are done during the COVID timeframes, where one assumes we weren't on what we'd call normal trends. We're in a cost of living crisis, as I think Councillor Masters was alluded to with his comment. Are people actually using the libraries just to stay warm at the moment? And to make a long-term decision about how we fund libraries, what system we should have, without really trying to take that out of the thinking, or we might easily make the wrong conclusion.
I think that's a good point. Councillor Cole, you have one more question.
Just the one, Chairman.
Good.
The financial summary gives what looks a bit like a series of cuts to me. What's actually involved? Obviously, there's the Hungerford one is relatively small, but there are some rather larger cuts.
Could I ask Councillor Woolston to address that issue? Is that probably more appropriate to you rather than to the officer?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no significant cuts proposed at the moment, or nor expected, to be honest. We're trying to keep a really good library service going. We are very highly reliant on our volunteers. But I really don't think there's anything I can see at the moment where we might be looking at a cut.
There's 560 on page 122. Am I just
Give me
misreading?
why I find it.
It's called a revenue budget. What does it really mean?
Shall I come in here? I
Please, that'd
mean,
be helpful.
the revenue budget, it is just the running costs, and there aren't any cuts proposed in this. The original budget is listed, and then the income target, and then the resulting column is the planned net expenditure.
So the net expenditure is going to be down under the original budget, net of that incoming money. Is that what that means?
Yeah, the original budget.
Yes.
The original budget's a gross figure. Okay.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Howard, do you have anything to wrap up with?
No, apart from the fact, I suppose, that as I said at the start, we are totally committed to the library service. We think it's a major plus for West Berkshire and also helps with our health and wellbeing programme. I just wish that we'd get more support from the town and parish councils.
Okay. Right. Well, if I could just close this session, make a few comments to me. Felicity, you're clearly on top of the job, and I appreciate that. The ability to answer all those questions and the report. My overall view of this report was kind of a curate's egg in a little bit, and let me explain why I say that, because I think some of our members have touched on it. I thought it was a very good report. It was very informative in parts, and especially when you go into the community needs assessment and the peer review. There's a lot of data in there, and I think you pull that together quite well. Where I felt I was expecting when I was to get the report, when I first started to read it, I was expecting almost a kind of a draft vision and strategy. I guess in the vernacular of tonight, a library charter. I think you've got to get that. What was frustrating a little bit to me, I think you have got the bones of that. On page 121, the library reviews recommendations. I don't think it would take very much further work to take those 6-7 points and turn them into your strategy, vision, charter. So I was a little bit disappointed that that's not what I saw. And then when you go beyond the strategy, you're into the next steps and costings. And I heard a lot of things we would like to do from both yourself and the portfolio member. And I think all of us, we'd all like to do it. But we live in a practical world, and there's a funding issue. And that all has to be figured out and done. So to me, the next steps would be, once you've got your strategy, you produce a budget to implement it. And that's obviously the next step. So I was just a little bit disappointed that that's what I was expecting. Maybe my expectations were wrong, but that's what I was expecting. Anyway, I think that's all I want to say. We're asked as a group here, as a commission, to do we wish to propose any further work or suggest any changes to the report before it goes to the executive, towards more work to go to the executive? I don't think so, other than I think with a little bit more work, you could probably produce your vision. Does members agree with that overall assessment? I see everyone nodding. Yeah, fine.
Chairman, all I would have added is to bring the data a little bit more up to speed before it goes forward.
I think that point was well made as well. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Nigel?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to thank Felicity because I happen to know she's on annual leave today and she's off on holiday tomorrow and she's taken time out to come and speak to you at the.
I didn't realize. I appreciate that. Thank you, Felicity. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to put forward this report. We're going to comment about the more up-to-date data if at all possible. And we'd like it all possible just to move the thing forward into a bit of a vision, strategy, charter, call it what you will. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9, fees and charges. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll first like.
Excuse me, Tony. I've just had a request for a comfort break. Does that feel? Yeah. Okay. Back here in 5 minutes. Okay. resume. So Councillor Linden, the fees and charges task and finish group, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to firstly thank Gordon Oliver for his hard work and dedication for the task group, as well as the members on my task group, Councillor Jeff Brooks, Councillor Aloko, and Councillor Steve Masters. So I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions. It was really welcome. The task group was set up to review the council's fees and charges, with particular focus on planning, leisure and other opportunities for commercial charging. In addition to looking at opportunities to introduce new fees and charges or increase existing one, the task group also looked at the value of money of existing chargeable services. An interim report was presented to OSMC in November 2022, which made recommendations about the presentation of information in fees and charges appendices of the budget report. I'm pleased to see that officers have already taken many of these into account for this year's reports. In undertaking the review, members sought to understand what options had been considered and what areas had the greatest potential for increasing revenue. Interviews were held with a number of executive directors and service directors and other senior officers, and I'd like to thank them for engaging in such a positive manner. The task group did not come up with any recommendations to the planning service, since many of their fees and charges are set centrally. Also, work had already been done as part of the place review to look how the council could make better use of pre-app process and planning performance agreements, which are the main areas where we have discretion over fees and charges. Because the task group was delayed, the review of leisure fees and charges took place just as the new leisure contract was being procured, which was not ideal. Members found that the ability to increase fees and charges is closely linked to the investment in our leisure facilities, and this should be delivered through the new contract and other schemes such as the Lido, which is currently in build. Members highlighted the lack of public swimming pool in the east of the district, which has been going on for several decades, which means that we lose revenue to neighbouring local authorities. For the Environment Department, the task group's main concern was in relation to charging of the supervision of the new estate roads. It seems that developers are increasingly seeking not having these adopted. This not only means that we lose the supervision and checking fees, which are significant, but can potentially lead to issues for residents in future years should management companies go bust or fail to deliver their maintenance responsibilities. In relation to commercial services, the main area of trading is selling service to academy schools. Members would like assurance that we've explored all options to increase market share. We've also proposed that consideration is given to provide incentives such as offering discounts for bundles and service potential charging on a per pupil basis and a flat fee. Members felt that all services should undertake regular benchmarking of fees and charges to ensure they are consistent with neighbouring comparator authorities. Our final recommendation is for OSMC to review the shore house operations, to see if there are any opportunities to derive additional income, since it's been some time since this has been considered. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Great comprehensive report. I didn't actually realise we have 47 pages of fees and charges. That was the thing that jumped out at me. Never mind the quality, feel the width of this. What a lot of those to work your way through. Well done. So, Councillor Masters, comments, questions?
Just a little bit of a mix of both, Chairman, if you would indulge me. Yeah, I'd like to echo Tony's comments about the work that Gordon Oliver has put in. Myriad of questions and amendments relating to the report, and also the members of the team who met in person and online, etc. One of the key recommendations that Tony's just mentioned about Shore House, I think that moving forward for me is one of the crucial and highest priorities. We've got a tremendous asset, as everybody knows. It's pertinent as it's in my ward, particularly. But we need to have a review and see where we are in terms of the strategy for maximising revenue in financial terms, but also maximising the social value. It's a great facility, and we should not get blinkered. And I would hope that whoever takes this on in the future, factors in the need to assess, if it is at all possible, the social viability and the social impact that a facility like Shaw House has in the community, not just in Newbury, but for the wider district. So that would be my comments, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think those social values have been taken into account. And I know I've sat through 5 or 6 budget meetings where people are trying to get Shaw House to make money, but it becomes difficult, and you're turning some of the social aspects.
Absolutely, and I think we keep coming back to the challenges that we have financially, and it's very easy to get into the weeds and think, well, it's losing 100 grand a year, but if it helped, I'm using that figure, randomly, but
yeah, I don't think it's as much as that.
Yeah, but if what does it actually add in terms of to the community indirectly?
No, I agree. One of the pleasures I have of being vice chairman of the council is I've been doing some citizenship ceremonies, which take place at Shaw House, and they're the most enjoyable part of the job, actually. And every one of them, there's usually anywhere between 12 and 20 people at a time every month, and they all love Shaw House. So there is that value there. I think we all agree with that. It's just a matter of getting the balance, which is recommendation. Tony.
Yes, Chairman, as Claire's joined us, obviously just to note, and I expect she's been briefed by Eric, our car parking fees have gone down since COVID. So I just thought that is a big chunk of income that's come down. Thanks.
I've got the other Tony Vickers.
Yeah, thing that I only had an email about today, so it's very topical, is contactless payment for parking, as opposed to always via mobile apps. I mean, COVID has brought everybody into the world of contactless payment, hasn't it? I mean, I pay everything on here now. So can we just prioritize contactless over mobile apps? I mean, especially as I see we have to pay a transaction fee, or somebody has to pay a transaction fee for the parking apps. But also we need to have certain locations, and I think this has already been agreed, where it's cash only, because we are a few years off everybody having a card method of payment. And, you can drive and still not be in the digital world, thankfully.
That's true. Chief Executive, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll pick up on that last point first, actually. I wasn't going to talk about that, as Tony's raised it. You do need the mobile apps, the phone apps as well, because of those who don't have smartphones effectively. However, most people do have a mobile phone. And you need to remember that to collect cash costs us money. And vast majority of authorities now are phasing cash out and going into cashless. But until everybody pays on their phone, as you've said, you do need a mobile phone app as well in the interim. So I think that's why we're going in that direction. And who would have envisaged a few years ago that we'd be buying a coffee with a telephone, but it's happening now. So I think that's the direction of travel. And, we've agreed that we need to phase out cash, basically. That's that point. The one point I was going to raise, which Tony mentioned in his introduction, and it's not something for a decision today, but it's something that I think over in Scrutiny we'll need to consider perhaps in next year. We're shortly, subject to full council approval in 16th of March, going to be appointing a new leisure contractor. And that will be a partnership that we'll have with a new contractor for 10 years, or it could be 15 years, 10 plus 5 years. And an awful lot of authorities now are moving away from controlling the charges within the leisure contract, because the leisure contractor needs to hit the right market and the right market level. There may be parts within it that you may want to continue to control, like, for example, the price of a swim. But to control all the prices within the leisure market in terms of our expertise versus the expertise of a leisure professional, I think is quite outdated nowadays. And if you give more freedoms to the leisure professional, bearing in mind that they are a leisure trust, they're not a profit-making organisation, they're a leisure trust. They will put the prices where they think the market can take it in relation to the surrounding market, if that makes sense. So that's something I think that the Scrutiny Committee will need to consider in the future. And that will be part of our discussions with the leisure contractor going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Abs?
Yeah, I think it was really just on the comment that you just made about they are trusts. Well, trusts can't run at a loss. And therefore, you know, letting them just do what they want without any connection back to the council would be slightly worrying for me, because we couldn't choose to subsidise. I'm not saying we would subsidise, but we might want to. And if we have no control or no connection to it whatsoever, then we've lost that control.
I think, thank goodness, this is next year's issue. Any more? Okay. I actually found this report. Actually, let me step back a little bit. When we started to talk about this, I think there was an expectation that somehow or other the task group would find some magic new sources of income that would, you know, right, to replace some of our parking revenues that had gone down, and that was quickly dispelled on the early meetings. So that's fine. And I see the recommendation, the findings, if you like, 5.8 and 5.9. As I went through them and reading this report, I'm ticking, yes, I agree, yes, I agree, yes, I agree. I think they're all quite good. I think they're all good guidance. It's, you know, we sat through budget meetings and the budget papers and the I don't know how many reams and reams and trees that are cut down for those papers with the fees and charges, but there's little explanation. And I think the task group pointing out, you know, we do need a little bit more explanation and data behind some of these recommendations. And that, so 5.9 to me is the heart of this report. I fully agree and support it. And we're being asked to outline the proposal in section 6, which is just follows 5.9, and send this to the executive for consideration. Anybody object to that? No. So I think that's a done deal. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Tony, and the other members of your task group for a good piece of work. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, next item is the COVID Recovery Task and Finish Group draft terms of reference. Now, I'd just like to frame this, if I might. We've got, Gordon's going to present the draft terms of reference, which you have in your papers. It's, as it says in the tin, it's a draft. I'd like to discuss those, and we can actually finalize those tonight to be handed on to the next OSMC, for the next OSMC to take them up and allocate a task group for them. So we're not going to go through, doesn't make any sense. None of us around this table know who's going to be sitting around this table in the next meeting. So we've got to leave the makeup of the task group to the next OSMC, but I'd like to leave them with a fairly comprehensive set of terms of reference. So Gordon, do you want to take us through those, please?
Yeah, just to give a little bit of background, members will recall that we had an initial report on the COVID response and recovery back in October 2021. And members felt at that time that there was not enough of a qualitative flavour to the report, and you asked for a task group to be set up, in particular to look at the impacts on residents, visitors and service users. So I've prepared a draft terms of reference trying to take that into consideration. I've talked to some of the key officers who've been involved in response and recovery and have tried to cover off all those sort of key aspects. So a couple of things that I just wanted to highlight. It's worth noting that this review was supposed to be progressed a little bit earlier. It has been delayed due to the other scrutiny reviews taking place. So we are now a little way after the pandemic response is concluded. Also, it's worth noting that some of the key officers who were involved have since left, which may make it slightly more challenging to dig into some of the details. And then just lastly, I just wanted to highlight that the national COVID inquiry is now underway, and we, in common with or other local authorities, are currently providing evidence for this. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any on the draft terms of reference.
Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask about the exactly what Gordon mentioned, really, about the number of members of staff who've moved on, and how that might impact the inquiry, and how the chairman and Gordon maybe seek to square that.
Well, from my point of view, is you take what the cards that are dealt to you. If people are there, they will hopefully be helpful. They can help people who aren't there. There's not much you can do about it unless you can, you can ask people. We have precedents for ex-officers, ex-councillors coming in to provide evidence, but you can't really compel. It's just one of those things.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Cole, James.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to see that the number's meant to be 5 this time around.
Does say to be confirmed.
I should say meant to be. Slightly more seriously, having just done one a bit like this, one thing we wanted to do was to include certainly councillors as witnesses, and we did. And we certainly talked about including members of the public at a more detailed level than in residence surveys. So I would ask for that to be considered. Even if members of the public are perhaps identified as people that we know of as parish councillors or something like that, a slightly wider approach.
I was about to suggest that actually, because although I'm not a member of our parish, one of our parish councils, I work very closely with the parish council when we formed a COVID action group and working with the street champions. And I know that nearly every parish in town did that or something similar. So if you wanted to get a broader residents' feedback, I would go to parish councils and ask them who was involved in the COVID and do that. And that's probably missing from that. It's a good catch. I agree. Agree with that, Gordon Beck? Okay. Tony, I think I had you up, Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was going to make a similar point. That could be a huge amount of increase in work and complexity. The other thing that's unusual about this task and finish group is that it is running in parallel with a national, if you like, scrutiny, to use the generic terms. And it's a bit sensitive, this. I mean, it's easy in retrospect, as we're finding out from all these leaked texts, to say, why did it happen like that? And isn't that awful? But it's to some extent, and I'm saying this as a member who's got no time for Mr. Hancock, maybe some of the members opposite are the same, but, you have to remember what was going on and the rush and the panic and the potential harm to the whole of the society that was believed to be likely, if not certain at some certain points. So how are we going to, I think we need to include in the methodology, or maybe as a sort of constraint, some reference to the national survey and to how officers and the public felt about the messages that were coming down from on high. Because although we're quite right to focus on scrutinizing how we responded to what was happening, large part of what was happening is we collectively, council officers and the public, were getting mixed messages, and we need to know how that impacted upon the way we
I think
felt and operated.
I know where you're coming from, but I think that's one of the dangers of broadening this out into a gigantic task group. What we've tried to do, don't forget, I get the sense that the National Commission, Royal Commission is looking at it, is going to point fingers and point blame. we don't want to do that in this. It's not part of the terms of reference. It's gain an understanding, not who was at fault, but, how do we actually support our care sector? And what could we have done differently, as opposed to, somebody shouldn't have done that. So I think if we can actually restrict this, which is the terms of reference here, there's no mention to national. And the terms of reference here are solely about the council's role in delivering public health emergency support, supporting the local businesses, supporting education, supporting the care sector. That's a chunk of businesses to start with. I don't think you want to broaden that out. If we could get a report in the next 6-7 months, which I think is one of the recommendations coming out of James's point, which I totally agree with. At the very end of this meeting, I'll comment on. I think we should time limit these task and finish groups to 6 months, because otherwise there is a danger of them. Perhaps you have 4 meetings and that's it. And if you can't cover all the ground, you can't cover all the ground.
I think you're right, and it probably should be explicit both in the terms of reference and in the report that everything that has been done or is to be done will exclude the national picture, because it would be just too difficult to separate one from the other.
Okay, exactly right. Okay, thanks for that. Who else have I got? Adrian.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I don't want to broaden it out, and certainly the blame game will do us no good at all at this level. However, it does specifically say lessons learned. And looking at yourself and what lessons did I learn when I push this information out is certainly one way of, you might learn something, but you'll learn a lot more if you kind of talk to the people who is delivered to. So, and it doesn't have to be just towns and parishes, although they will have had some input. Early on, my memory tells me it was lots of charities and the bids and the people like that were receiving the information. Very valuable to get them in some kind of, how did you receive what we pushed out to you? What can we learn from it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, from my own personal experience at around Streatley and Aldworth area, we had to deal with remember the street champions? And they were all involved. They had nothing to do with council or parish. They just rose up, formed their own Facebook, WhatsApp groups and what have you. And they were a great help, but they were a devil's own job to try to work with eventually, because the first thing they came across was, oh, it's the council trying to take control. And those are the sort of issues that, I think we need to understand those, but yeah, it was just a way of life. And those things happened, and we muddled through because there was no playbook.
No, but there's real value in kind of trying to learn something from how we went about delivering
I would not want to suppress that. I totally agree. Okay. Steve, I think.
If I can just come back in on the witnesses, just it's slightly related to that. The third sector agencies, and maybe we can bring in the Volunteer Bureau to interview. I don't think particularly sure. And like Chris Bolton from Greenham.
Good catch for Chris. Good. Well, I was thinking of what's his name, Gary Paulson.
Yeah, Gary from the Volunteer Bureau.
Yeah, that's a good catch because they were involved. Yeah.
I think those two at the very least, and maybe people like James from Fair Close, etc.
Okay. Yes, and they're quite articulate. They'll give it to you in one go, won't they? So yeah. Indeed. Okay. So anything else? Oh my God, Dennis.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Cole's point, I think in engaging with the towns and parishes, you're also going to pick up a lot of the volunteer, both established voluntary groups, as well as ones that cropped up during the pandemic itself. I think the towns and parishes will be a good point of reference really for looking out to the community, the wider community.
Agreed. B.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we could tighten up the desired outcomes, because right now it just says members will collate their findings. And I wondered if we should be specific to say, given that it's about lessons learned and how we can apply that to the future, to come up with some recommendations. So it just doesn't end with findings, but they must come up with recommendations which then feed into the report.
I think that's implied, but you want to make it explicit, that's fine. Yeah, I think so. Recommendations. Agreed. Agreed. Okay. I've got old hands, think Stephen, Dennis, you done, okay, fine. So with those little additions, can we agree? I would like to add one more, which is the one we've talked about, and it's not here. Can we write in a 6-month time from, not say, I don't want to say when we're going to start, but from when we do start, make it 6 months. Yeah.
Would that be from the first meeting, Chairman?
The first meeting should select the task group, yeah.
And then
No, and they could, of course, they could be complete different. They may have a different set of
Yeah, well, yeah.
priorities. They may decide we don't want to do this. I don't think that will happen, but that could. Okay. Well, thank you for that, members. That was good feedback. Thank you. Right. Now we've got the next, the financial reports, the financial, the revenue and the capital. Now, I don't really, let me advise you, I don't think we ought to go into this in very great detail because normally, as you know, we've been getting these first before they go to executive, and we've been commenting and advising executive to look at certain aspects. For some reason, which I'm not quite sure I've got to the bottom of quite, the executive got this before it came here. And I think it's one of the things I like this minuted as well. One of the things I hope you all agree with me, that, you know, we spent a lot of time syncing our timetables to make sure that we saw these reports before they went to executive, so we could help the executive with questions. So I don't know quite why this one didn't happen, but it didn't happen, and the executive have got it, so we can add very little value to it, therefore, to help the executive. So having said that, I guess, where are you, Joseph? Do you want to sort of lead us off and give us a quick summary of the revenue paper first?
Yeah, thanks you, Chairman. I was just going to explain as well the reason that you didn't receive it for executive. So there is a clear reason on that. And that is where, when the budget papers go out to the executive, at the same time, I have to make a statement in there as the 151 officer about what Q3 looks like. And those papers get distributed on the 1st of February. And so, given that the month would have only closed 31 days before then, like, we are really pushing it to get it through all of the respective cycles, even just out to executive by the 1st of February. So there was no intent for it not to come here first. It's just, there is always, and it will always be thus, a really big squeeze on the Q3 position to get out to executive at that time. So you'd have had to put an overview and scrutiny in literally the day before executive, because that was the very fastest that we could push it out there. That always happens at Q3, unless we decide to set our budget later, but I wouldn't recommend that one.
Okay, so you're saying that's going to happen in the future?
That will always happen. So you'd have to literally stick an overview and scrutiny, or sorry, a scrutiny committee in the future, literally like a day or two beforehand. Otherwise, we'd just never push it through. See, you know, Q3 closes on the 31st of December. You normally got 1 or 2 bank holidays in there as well. And so the time it's gone through, even we're asking people to make forecasts already halfway through January, and the papers go out literally just over a week afterwards.
Okay, so thanks for that explanation.
Just on the report itself, it's already been to executive, a similar position to the previous quarter, but some reasons where there's some greater pressures in there around children's services spend, and the pay award coming through, offset by some high levels of underspends in certain services, for example, in the police directorate, and a switch around on some of the use of reserves. But actually, the overall position is quite similar. But clearly a sort of significant overspend position compared to where we usually are.
Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to add really that obviously this has also been discussed at the budget meeting last Thursday. That's all I wish to say, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Abs.
Is it working? Yeah, it's working.
Isn't it?
I don't want to go into the detail because it's rather horrible to look at. However, I think going forward, maybe Mr. Holmes or the executive would Outline take this on board. I'm looking at page 298 specifically, everybody, and it's a chart of analysed client numbers and long-term services, and there's a whole bunch of bits at the bottom of it that basically tell me the joining line projection model, so on and so forth. The dark orange line with the dots on it doesn't seem to have an explanation of what that is, but so I kind of guess that from the next one. But straight away, I'm at a point where I shouldn't be needing to guess what anything is on our chart. It should tell me straight away and be clear. So then when I look at that number though, if I take the solid blue line, the model, and it seems to indicate that the model was predicting a sudden drop in 2021 and it was going to stay low in 2022 and now is predicted to go up, which is back to some kind of trend. I have no idea, and maybe Joseph can explain why the model would have been saying this. We know we had COVID back in 2020. But yeah, and so I take that, and then I go on to the next one, and yeah, it's the how easy these reports are to penetrate, and it might be someone with an accounting degree can get it all sorted out, but if I'm a member of the public and I want to look at it, how hard am I making it for them to understand what's going on? And I think this is a bar too high in my mind.
I'm going to agree with you and then disagree with you. I agree with you on first sight that you're absolutely right. You know, you look at it and say, what the hell's this? Or how do I interpret it? And I'm getting into a lot of detail. Two things, however. Number one, if you read the commentary explains them, okay? Now, I know your personality, you like to look at graphs and tables first.
I do.
Read the commentary. The other thing is, I can't remember now, was it 12 months or 18 months ago? We actually had a complete scrutiny here before you were on this commission of the adult social care model, because it's almost since I've been on the council, or most of us, every year adult social care overspent, and we just before the COVID they went into looking at completely new models, because one of the things, not just adult social care, children's social care, one of the things you have a 6-year-old who frankly 20, 30 years ago would have died, born badly handicapped, and they need care and education. And that suddenly hits you as a one-off. It wasn't forecast. So, you know, you have one or two of those, it throws your models out. So we went into all of that. And of course, I got sympathy for these modelers with COVID. You know, COVID reduced our numbers dramatically, and you know, very sadly. But yeah, so that's what that's all about. I think what we did say at the time was sometime in the future, and again, the Future Commission could say, let's go back and have a look at that modelling. Yeah, in the light of some of this experience. Chairman,
I agree with you, and you should read all the words, but the idea behind a graph is that it summarizes the detail. Otherwise, there's no point in having the graph in the first place. So.
I know. Well, there you go. Joseph.
Yeah, I was just, yeah, thank you, Chairman. So just through you, just responding to Councillor Abs' his point on the graph, a fair point that it's perhaps got busy over time with quite a few different colours on there, so we can simplify that down. I think, though, the graph has stimulated and has got across is that point that the modelled expectation in the current year compared to the number of clients that we've seen coming through was lower, and had a lot of discussions with sort of Mr. Coe in the sort of run up to the current year's budget around are we going to see a sudden increase in numbers back up to the pre-pandemic levels or not? Our assumption at the time we set the budget was that it would remain at at the levels of where it was previously, you can see that in the model there there has been a sort of regression back to that longer term trend in numbers, and that is a key reason for A, the overspend, and B, the significant amount of money that we're putting together a social care budget for 2023-24. But I take your point around the busyness of that graph.
I have chastised him for not reading the text, but he does have a point about the graph, and if you could only have a look at that for future. I think if we'd been doing a full scrutiny in this before executive, you'd have been asking the questions and we'd be really into it. I agree with you on that. The only thing I would say, Joseph, is at long last, I appreciate page 307, 5.36. We do have a table with all our agency spend, highlights it. And all I can say on that is it's too high. When I'm thinking of going through that budget and what we had to do, there's 2 or 3, 4 or 5 percentage points on the council tax there. Steve.
If I can come in on that point, Chairman, I think maybe if there's a different outlook with the new makeup of the council post 4th of May, then I think that might be something that this group and the wider council can possibly look at in conjunction with the service providers. I think a lot of the agency work is symptomatic of the state of the care system, and I think that's something that
I think it's beyond local politics actually, but nevertheless we should, it is, but nevertheless.
But we shouldn't be scared to grasp the net.
I think we should be. I think there are ways around it, and it just needs a little bit of creative thinking, I think. And anyway, there you go. Okay.
Maybe we can bring more care in-house.
Oh.
And pay people a decent living wage.
Maybe you could have flexible pension contracts. Pay people less pension, more salary, give them more flexibility. All of those sorts of things. Yeah, we've discussed them in the past, and I keep getting, oh, you can't do that, but or it's national policy.
I was going to say I'm not a pensions expert, so I wouldn't want to comment on that particularly.
But it's why we've got a shortage of carers when you think about it. Anyway, there's a big topic, but it's to me the numbers are the canary in the coal mine, and they're too high. Okay, Joseph, capital now, please.
Yeah, summary on capital is sort of reduced forecast overspend, reduced forecast total spend during the current year. So reprofiling quite a bit of that into the next financial year. Variety of sort of reasons on that, one of which includes inflationary costs and obtaining also materials for all of our schemes. The flip side of that is in the short term actually provides us with benefit because we see in the previous paper increased amount of returns on our cash flow on the short term, where we don't have to go out and borrow as well for capital purposes.
Okay, any questions, any comments? I think it's self-explanatory. Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. Appreciate that. And I really do appreciate the agency table that you put in for me. Thank you. Nice going away present. Okay, next item is Health and Scrutiny Committee updates, a verbal update. Do we have one? Tony?
Thanks, Chairman. In December, the Health Scrutiny Committee met to review STAMO provisions at the Berkshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust and dentistry services. There was also updates for the Integrated Care Board, the ICB, and Healthwatch West Berkshire. Items for the next Health Scrutiny Committee on the 14th of March, including pharmacy provision, an update on the Royal Berkshire Hospital redevelopment programme, which they've had a lot of public engagement up to now and more, and an update from the South Central Ambulance Service on their improvement programme and current performance, because they're in problems they need to improve. The Buckinghamshire which is a unitary authority, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which I'm a member of, the JHOS, met on the 25th of January at the Buckinghamshire County Council. That's where we meet. The Bob Integrated Care Partnership was discussed. There's been followed up feedback from the JHOS to the ICP on the strategy, whatever. There's been ongoing work on 2 task groups. Before I go on to that, we may have another meeting before the May elections. I spoke to the chair there, Jane McBean, who assisted me with a leaflet delivery today at lunchtime. There's been ongoing work with 2 task groups. The Continuing Healthcare CHC task group chaired by Councillor Alan Macro has met to discuss the transformation programme and activities following the peer review of CHC in July 2022. The transformation programme will be very thorough and in-depth, so it's been agreed to discontinue the task group and for the CHC to be a substantial item on the work programme for the next municipal year when the committee can review the progress made by the transformation programme. The second task group is looking at healthcare provisions and new developments. The work programme has been agreed and the first main item of the task group will look at the protocol between West Berkshire and healthcare providers. And I'd also like to thank Vicky for her work in assisting the committee, and also Gordon Oliver, who's has some involvement as well. So that's what I just would like to report, Jim.
Thanks, Tony. Any questions of Tony? No? Fine, thank you very much. Next, move on then to item 14, which is in pages 333 to 350, which is the council's forward plan. Now, I was looking at this. Some of the forward plan that's on that has already taken place.
That's exactly the point I was going to make.
I think it's probably, this is probably a feature of the fact that we're coming to the end of a 4-year council stint. But has anybody got, Councillor Abs, you got your hand up?
Yeah, a similar vein, actually, Chairman, page 334. I thought Shiraz had left us. I still see his name on the documents. So,
Okay, well, that's, please note that. Indeed, indeed. Maybe you want to call him back for the COVID. Okay, yeah, so I got a little comment on forward plan. We'll leave it until the very end. And then there's the overview and scrutiny management commission, the work program, which is the very last page. So we have an agenda, of course, for June, which is looking at equalities and diversity, cultural heritage strategy, delivery plan, and to agree the makeup of the COVID recovery that we've just agreed terms of reference on. I'm sure the new OSMC may add 1 or 2 things to that and to the rest of the program, so I've got to leave it to them. Are there any other questions or points before I close the meeting? No, okay. I'd just like to close by, this is my last, in fact, this is probably my last council meeting. I've been in this chair at OSMC now for just over 5 years.
Ooh, Chairman, sorry, will you not be at full council next week?
No, I will be down on the Costa del Sol. And if you have a choice between being in a council meeting and the Costa del Sol, you know, I'm sure most people would vote for the Costa del Sol. That's fun. So I've been here on this committee here, chairing this committee. I have the privilege of chairing it for 5 years. So it's been an interesting experience. It's partly gamekeeper and partly poacher, really, on this. A couple of comments that I got to make. One that I've harped on and on for a long time is we have insufficient officer resource for this job. If we want to do it properly, and we're not trying to do everything, we always agreed that we'd have 3 themes. Well, since I've been involved, we did a kind of a quick update as to, you know, what should we focus on. There didn't seem to be any focus. It just seemed to be whatever came to us. And we tried to focus. I brought 3 themes in, which was council effectiveness, monitoring that, partnership effectiveness, and policy effectiveness. And we agreed we'd try to do two investigations in parallel at a time. And at one time we had two officers. In fact, one time we had two officers plus a little bit of the officer's manager. That's gone away. So I have continually complained, and I've talked to the chief executive. He tells me there's something coming to help resource it, but it's up to the next OSMC to screw that one down, if I can use that term. I think Gordon's done a sterling job, and yeah, well done. And the other officers supporting us, and like Lizzie here. Okay. The other thing I feel, I touched on it tonight, I did have a number of officers come to me, and, you know, I'll use the word complain because that's what they were doing about, you know, well, we're asking too many questions. You know, I don't have the time to do this. You know, we're doing that already. And as I said earlier, my reply to them was, well, you don't understand what scrutiny is about, because we have an absolute right, an obligation, in fact, to ask these questions when we set up task groups. So that's something I have pointed out to one or two of them were senior officers as well. I have already pointed that out, and I think the message is getting home. But I would suggest that whoever's on the next OSMC is cognizant of that fact that we may have to bang a few heads together to make scrutiny, overview and scrutiny work properly. Now this is an interesting one. This will surprise a number of people. Looking back, call-ins that come to OSMC are very different from anything we've had tonight. Call-ins by their very nature are political. And they get called into OSMC. I think when you have a call-in, we should have a separate meeting. And I do really think it should be chaired by an independent person for a call-in.
Here.
The reason for that is I believe I have done my damnedest to be as impartial as possible. But quite honestly, politics do come into it. So you feel the pressure. I can manage that. I'm a big boy. But the perception, I think, of the public watching in is that I'm not impartial or I'm not doing it. So I think for call-ins, and I've recommended this, that call-ins should be, if at all possible, chaired by an independent person because they are political. I'm not saying we should change the political makeup, but that's the way I think it should be, just if for nothing other than the optics. And the other thing that I think we're going to have to struggle with a little bit when I see the forward plan here tonight, we worked very hard. I have agreement with the chief executive and with the leader that should have some of the big strategic issues on a forward plan highlighted to OSMC 18 months ahead to give us time if we decide that's something we would like to get ahead of and do proactive overview and review and actually help the help the administration. But you can't do that. You often see things coming up and you find, oh, they're in 3 months or even 6 months' time. You don't have time to do it. So again, I think the next commission really ought to make sure that there's those key issues on the forward plan are 12, 18 months out to help us do the job. Those are my, if you like, lessons to be learned and recommendations. And I'd just like to thank you all for participating and helping me.
If I may just say a few words, Chairman, thank you very much. I've only been your vice chair for a relatively short period, actually. Yeah, there's things to learn from the side seat here, watching someone do it as you've done with the experience you have. So thank you for that. And I'm sure others would wish to thank you for your service over the time on the committee and so on. I can say with pretty much 100% certainty that your wish in terms of how an independent coming in or some more independents coming in is going to be received with open ears. I doubt anybody would argue against it.
Okay.
Chairman,
Purely from a perspective, a public perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Chairman, on a personal note, I'd like to thank you as well, but you actually gave me the trust in allowing me to chair a task group in the middle of it and the fees and charges. And I would have appreciated some of my other group at the senior level to have given me that trust in other areas as well. Thank you very
Okay,
much, Chairman.
You did a good job, Tony.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for all those kind words. The meeting is